I was sitting there in my small apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina, my eyes stinging from having been glued to the computer screen for hours on end. I'm Peyton Price, 37 years old, a freelance journalist who occasionally writes investigative pieces for local newspapers. Tonight, I had just finished the final draft of an article about local corruption, a chaotic mess of figures and testimonies that had left me utterly drained. The wall clock showed exactly 1 a.m. I turned off the desk lamp, gathered the scattered papers on the table, and stuffed them into a drawer. The room fell so silent that I could hear the ticking of the wall clock and the faint whisper of wind slipping through the window crack. I took off my shirt, tossed it onto the sofa, and was about to head into the bedroom when a knock sounded at the door. Steady, deliberate, unmistakable. It shattered the absolute quiet of the apartment like a time bomb going off. My heart clenched. Who on earth would come looking for me at this hour? Raleigh isn't a dangerous city, but a single guy like me living alone in this rundown old complex never expects visitors in the middle of the night. I froze in the middle of the living room, ears straining, hoping it was just fatigue playing tricks on me. But no, the knock came again. Louder this time, as if the person outside were growing impatient. A wave of unease surged through me, cold and relentless. I'm not the superstitious type, but in the dead of night, that knock sounded like a warning straight from hell. Maybe it's a neighbor, I told myself. Maybe they need help. Deep down, though, I knew it wasn't. My neighbors are lonely old folks who go to bed at 9 p.m. sharp. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and slowly walked toward the door. Each step felt heavy, as though the floor itself were trying to hold me back. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it throbbing in my ears. The apartment suddenly seemed cramped and suffocating. And then the third knock came, startling me so badly I nearly stumbled. I stopped in front of the door, my trembling hand reaching for the deadbolt. I called out softly to whoever was on the other side, my voice cracking with fear. No answer, only a heavier silence. I pressed my eye to the peephole, that tiny lens I rarely ever used. The dim yellow hallway light illuminated an old man well over 60 standing there in an old-fashioned suit, his white hair disheveled under the faint glow. He was tall, slightly stooped, and his face— God, that face. A chill ran through my entire body, as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over my head. That face was identical to Davis Price, my father, in a way that made my skin crawl. My father, who had died 4 years ago from a sudden heart attack. The straight, high-bridged nose, the deep-set eyes, the square jaw, everything was exactly the same. I staggered back in panic, my back slamming against the wall, my heart racing so wildly I thought it might burst. I whispered to myself, "No way, you're just exhausted, Peyton. You're hallucinating." My father was dead. I clearly remembered the rain-soaked funeral, the coffin being lowered into the grave, and the pain that still haunted me to this day. How could he be standing outside my door? I told myself to calm down. Maybe it was sleep deprivation or that damn article messing with my head. I took a deep breath and tried to laugh at myself. It's just an old man who looks like Dad. The world is big, doppelgangers exist. But the bad feeling wouldn't let go. I looked through the peephole again. He was still there, motionless, staring straight at the door as if he knew I was watching. The face hadn't changed. Not a hallucination. My heart beat faster, cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. What should I do? Call the police? Pretend I wasn't home? Then the knock came again, softer this time, almost pleading. After an internal battle between fear and reason, I decided to open the door. I couldn't hide forever. I clenched my fists, took a deep breath, and slid back the deadbolt. The door creaked open and cold air from the hallway rushed in. I stood there on high alert, ready to slam it shut if anything seemed off. The old man was only a few steps away, taller than I'd thought, and now, under the light from my living room, I could see he wasn't my father. Yet every feature looked copied from the same mold, from the crow's feet around the eyes to the tightly pursed lips. The only difference was in the eyes, sharp, alert, and filled with determination. Not the weary, sorrowful gaze my father had worn in his final years. "I'm sorry to disturb you so late at night," he said slowly, his voice deep and warm but carrying a note of urgency. My name is Vicente Price. I'm 66 years old. I am the identical twin brother of Davis Price, your father. I have been quietly searching for you for many years. I stood frozen as if the world had stopped turning. Identical twin brother? My father had never once mentioned having any siblings, let alone a twin. We had lived a simple life. Dad worked at a small company, Mom was a housewife. There were no big secrets. I stammered, my voice shaking. My father didn't have any brothers. Who are you? How do you know my name? Vicente didn't flinch. He looked me straight in the eye, and that gaze sent chills down my spine, too much like my father's, yet somehow alien. I'm not joking, Peyton. I had to come see you tonight because there's something of utmost importance concerning your true origins. You can't be kept in the dark any longer. Let me in, and I'll tell you everything. This isn't something that can be discussed in the hallway. His words left me reeling. I thought back to my father, Davis Price, a quiet man who loved his family but always carried a faint, lingering sadness. He had died suddenly, leaving my mother so devastated she had to be institutionalized, and now a stranger appears claiming to be his identical twin. My heart raced faster. Was this the beginning of a nightmare, or the revelation of a truth I had never known? I stood there in the middle of my cramped living room staring at Vicente Price, the man whose face was an uncanny, chilling replica of my father's. The late-night air in Raleigh seemed to thicken, and the ticking of the clock sounded like a reminder that time was slipping away, and my life was perhaps about to change forever. I invited him in, my voice hoarse from a throat gone dry. I stepped aside to let him pass, but my hand stayed clenched around the deadbolt, ready to slam the door shut at the slightest hint of danger. Vicente nodded and crossed the threshold slowly, as though he were carrying an enormous, invisible burden. My apartment, the place where I had always felt safe amid piles of books, newspapers, and the lingering smell of old coffee, suddenly felt alien, like a stage set for a play whose script I had never been given. I closed the door, carefully locked it, then pointed to the sofa. "Please sit." I poured him a glass of water and took the chair opposite him, separated by the small coffee table. A heavy silence settled over us, thick and cold as fog. I watched him warily, my mind racing with 100 questions. Who was he, really? How did he know about me? And why now, in the middle of the night? Vicente took the glass, sipped once, then set it down. His eyes met mine, and in that moment I saw a profound sadness, the same sadness I remembered in my father when he sat alone by the window, staring out at the rain-soaked streets of Raleigh. "First of all, thank you for opening the door," Vicente began, his voice deep and warm but trembling slightly. "I know what I'm about to tell you will sound almost impossible to believe, but please hear me out until the end. A few months ago, I went to visit an old friend who was being treated at a psychiatric hospital on the outskirts of New York. The place was eerily quiet, long echoing corridors, the sharp smell of disinfectant hanging in the air." He paused, steadying himself, then continued. "As I was walking down one of those corridors, an older woman suddenly burst out of a patient room and grabbed my arm. She started sobbing uncontrollably, calling me Davis, my beloved husband. Then she threw her arms around me, trembling, whispering, 'You've come back. Please don't leave me again.' I listened, my heart pounding. His story sounded like something out of a horror movie, both strange and disturbingly familiar. Vicente went on, his voice slow, as though he were turning over painful memories. "At first I thought it was just a symptom of her illness. In psychiatric wards, people often mistake strangers for someone else. I gently tried to free myself and told her I wasn't the person she was looking for." He paused again, gathering himself. "But then she looked me straight in the eyes and said my brother's name. 'Davis Price, you are my Davis.' In that moment, Peyton, I froze. Davis was the name of my identical twin brother, the one who vanished more than 40 years ago and was erased from every family record. I couldn't understand how a complete stranger could know that exact name. His words hit me like a punch to the chest. The air in the room grew heavier, as though the walls were closing in. The staff quickly intervened, pulling the woman back to her room and sedating her. But Vicente couldn't let it go. He asked to speak with the doctor and inquired about the woman. After they took her away, I learned her name was Dorothy Price, 64 years old, Vicente said, his voice dropping as if he were revealing a terrible secret. She is your mother, Peyton. She was admitted 4 years ago, right after her husband died. And that husband, Davis Price, was my brother. At those words, I went numb. The hand holding my glass trembled, water sloshed dangerously close to the rim. A cold shiver ran down my spine like an electric current from head to toe. My mother, Dorothy, the woman wasting away in a psychiatric ward because of the shock of losing my father. Vicente sighed softly and continued. That brief encounter haunted me for weeks. I barely slept, kept thinking about her, about the name Davis. In the end, I had no choice but to start digging into who this woman really was. I used old connections to access medical records, civil registry files, any scattered clues I could find. I traced everything backward, from birth certificates to marriage records. I sat there listening, feeling as though I were trapped in a dream. Every word tightened the knot in my chest. Vicente went on, his voice growing more urgent. From those documents, I discovered the identity of her deceased husband. When I saw the photograph in the file, an old faded picture, I knew instantly. It was Davis, my twin brother. He had walked away from the family, disappeared more than 40 years ago. I still remember the day he left. A rainy morning, he packed his suitcase and told us he was in love with a woman and could no longer live in the gilded cage of the family. Excitement and dread surged through me. I could almost see it. My father, young and determined, walking away from a life of wealth I had never known existed. Vicente explained that more than 40 years earlier, Davis had belonged to a powerful New York dynasty, an empire of finance with mansions, companies, and hidden influence. But my father had willingly abandoned it all to run away with the woman he loved, my mother, Dorothy. He met her at university, an ordinary girl from Raleigh, Vicente said, his voice tinged with regret. That love made him defy our parents, your grandparents, who put the family above everything. They forced him to sever all ties, erased his name from the family records, and forbade him from ever revealing his true identity. Davis accepted those terms in exchange for his freedom. He vanished, started a new life here in Raleigh, worked an ordinary job, and raised you and your brother. I sat in stunned silence as each detail rewrote my memories. The quiet, modest father I had known was suddenly fracturing into entirely different pieces. I remembered how he would sit alone, staring into the distance, never speaking of his past. My father hadn't been an ordinary man. He had been the son of a powerful dynasty who sacrificed everything for love. Why didn't you look for him sooner? I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of emotion and anger. Where were you for the last 40 years? Vicente lowered his head and sighed. I won't deny it, Peyton. For many years I had no trace of my twin brother. The family forbade any search and treated him as a traitor. I tried, secretly hired private investigators, but it was hopeless. Davis had hidden himself too well. It wasn't until I met Dorothy in that hospital that the pieces finally connected. She was the key. And now I've come to you at this hour only to give you back the truth about who you really are. You are a grandson of the Price family, Peyton. And I want to make amends for the wrongs the family did to your father. We left him alone for far too long. His words overwhelmed me. I stood up and paced the room, trying to process everything. My heart was racing, as if waiting for a bomb to go off. Was this the truth? Or some elaborate deception? I thought of my mother, of the few times I had visited her in the ward, how she always seemed lost, calling out for Dad. Now I understood why. Uncle Vicente sat there in silence, waiting for me to calm down. His eyes were full of patience, yet behind them lay a profound sorrow, as if he were looking at his own life reflected in my face. Finally, I sat back down and asked in a hoarse voice, Uncle, tell me, what does all of this mean for me now? Uncle Vicente let out a long sigh and placed the glass of water on the table. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick business card, the gold lettering glinting under the living room light. "This is my phone number and address in New York," he said slowly, his deep voice warm yet pleading. "Peyton, you are blood of the Price family. I hope you will soon return and meet everyone. Not for money or power, but because you deserve to know your roots. Don't let your father, my brother, die without a true heir to carry on." His words sent a chill through me. Return? To a family that had once cast my father out? I took the card, my fingers trembling as they brushed the smooth surface, as though it were the key to a door I wasn't ready to open. Uncle stood, gave a small nod of farewell, and said, "Think it over carefully, Peyton. I'll be waiting for your call." The door closed behind him, leaving the apartment steeped in heavy silence. I sat there staring at the card, my heart still pounding. That night, sleep never came. I tossed and turned, memories of my father crashing over me like waves. My father, the quiet, simple man who always wore old shirts, worked in a small workshop, taught me how to fix bicycles, and told me bedtime fairy tales. Now he was the son of a financial dynasty? I pictured him young, walking away from a grand mansion in New York, suitcase in hand, all for his love of my mother. Pain and pride twisted together in my chest. But then fear surged in. If I went back, would I lose myself? After that night, I fell into weeks of endless insomnia. Dark circles ringed my eyes, my mind was exhausted, yet my thoughts never stopped. I wandered around Raleigh, walking beside the familiar lake, trying to weigh my quiet current life. Freelance journalism, writing articles, morning coffee, no obligations, against a completely alien world of power and wealth. The Price family. Mansions, money, influence. I imagined lavish gatherings, scrutinizing stares, hidden schemes. Then the image of my mother in the psychiatric ward would appear, lonely, muttering Davis's name. If Uncle Vicente was telling the truth, maybe the family could help her. I picked up the phone, dialed his number, then hung up. Over and over, heart racing, palms sweating cold. Would this be the biggest mistake of my life? Finally, after a week of torment, I decided to face the truth. I couldn't live with questions hanging over me forever. I called Uncle Vicente, my voice shaking. "Uncle, I'm ready. I'll come to New York with you." His voice on the other end was thick with emotion. "Good, Peyton. I'll pick you up at the airport. This is a new beginning." I packed a simple bag, just a few changes of clothes, my laptop, and an old family photo, then boarded the plane. Throughout the flight, my heart pounded wildly, excitement and dread mixing like I was hurtling into an adventure with no way back. New York appeared beneath the wings, its skyscrapers glittering, but to me it looked like a labyrinth full of secrets. Uncle Vicente himself met me at JFK, standing beside a gleaming black limousine with a uniformed driver. He hugged me tightly, voice breaking. "Welcome home, Peyton." I slid into the car and watched Manhattan speed past the window as he told me about the family. An empire with stakes in banking, real estate, and technology. The car stopped in front of the main residence on the Upper East Side, a grand old mansion with tall iron gates, lush gardens, and chandeliers sparkling through the windows. I stepped out, legs trembling, feeling as though I were crossing into another world. My heart thumped so hard I clutched the strap of my bag. My first introduction to the family took place in an enormous living room with a roaring fireplace and antique paintings on the walls. Uncle Vicente presented me to about 24 people, cousins, uncles, aunts, and senior members. "This is Peyton Price, son of Davis, my brother, the one who was erased from the family tree." His voice rang out, full of pride. On the surface, there were formal handshakes, polite smiles, and courteous congratulations. But beneath it, I felt the weight of suspicious, envious, and hostile stares. A middle-aged woman whispered to the person beside her, shooting me sidelong glances. An old man cleared his throat in clear disapproval. Sweat soaked the back of my shirt as I forced an awkward smile. Tension rose. Would they ever accept me? The sharpest opposition came from Chris Price, Uncle Vicente's own son, roughly my age, wearing an expensive suit and perfectly styled hair. He stood up, voice ice cold. "Father, what kind of joke is this? Some guy from Raleigh shows up claiming to be a grandson. We need solid proof, not just words. Inheritance isn't a game." Chris's eyes cut into me like knives, pure hostility. I felt stabbed, but Uncle Vicente stepped in. "That's enough, Chris. Peyton is our blood. Tests will be done, but he is here to reunite, not to fight over money." Chris snorted and turned away, but I saw his fists clench. To him, I was a direct threat to the inheritance he had been raised to claim. My grandfather, William Price, 88 years old, sat at the head of the table like a king, silver hair and hawk-sharp eyes. He was the ultimate symbol of power, the man who had built this empire from nothing. Yet he only watched in silence, giving no indication of his stance. His gaze swept over me as if appraising merchandise. I bowed my head and said shakily, "I'm Peyton Price." "Hello, grandfather." He gave a slight nod but said nothing. The air in the room was thick with tension. I wanted to bolt. The evening ended with a formal dinner, but I barely tasted the food, my mind spinning with stares and whispers. After that meeting, Uncle Vicente and I began regularly visiting my mother at the psychiatric hospital outside New York. Each trip made my hands shake as I walked into her room. She sat there, frail and gray-haired, but when she saw me, she smiled weakly and called my name. Uncle Vicente stood beside me, and when her eyes fell on him, she whispered, "Davis." "Did both father and son come?" He gently took her hand. "I'm not Davis, Dorothy. I'm Vicente, his brother." Gradually, the visits became routine. Uncle's wife had died years earlier from cancer, leaving him alone in that vast mansion. Between him and my mother, a quiet bond slowly formed, as if the lost father had become an invisible thread tying two lonely souls together. They would talk for hours, about old memories, about Davis, about the happy days in Raleigh. I sat nearby, listening, my heart warm yet aching. With the family's resources, Uncle Vicente spared no expense to help her. He brought in the best doctors from Harvard, imported medication from Europe, and designed a personalized treatment plan: psychotherapy, medication, even music therapy. I watched him sign checks without hesitation, saying, "I'll do whatever it takes to help your mother recover." The first signs of improvement appeared. She became more lucid, remembered my name clearly, told stories without drifting. She held me tighter and said softly, "My son, I'm sorry I missed so much." I cried, the first time in years, tears flooding out like a broken dam. But then during one visit, Mother looked at me with a strange expression, as if hiding something. "Is there something you're not telling me?" I asked, my heart racing with sudden unease. She shook her head, but I knew a secret was about to surface, and I was nowhere near ready to face it. After the intensive treatment program that Uncle Vicente had arranged, my mother's mental health began to recover in a way that was nothing short of remarkable. She was no longer distant or confused, no longer calling out for my father in panicked delirium. Instead, she clearly recognized her loved ones in the world around her. Our visits to the hospital grew warmer, as though we were slowly reclaiming everything we had lost. She told me little memories from Raleigh, the time Dad taught me to fish by the lake, or how she used to make my birthday cakes with lopsided frosting. I sat and listened, my heart warm, yet at the same time a vague unease lingered. Yes, Mom was getting better, but sometimes her gaze drifted far away, as if she were clutching a heavy secret. I tried not to dwell on it and focused on the joy of the moment, but that uneasy feeling hovered, turning every visit into something tinged with nervous anticipation. One afternoon, Uncle Vicente and I were sitting with her in the hospital room. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, falling across her face, which now had color again instead of its former pallor. We told her that the family had finally acknowledged me. "Mom, I've come to New York. I've met Grandfather and everyone in the Price family," I said, trying to sound cheerful. Uncle Vicente nodded and added, "Peyton is one of us now, Dorothy. Davis, you're Davis." would be so proud. Mom listened, her eyes lighting up, and she smiled, a real smile, not the vague one from the earlier days. Is that true? My son has found his roots? I'm so happy, Peyton. I always knew you deserved better things. But that happiness was always mixed with an unease she couldn't quite hide. She squeezed my hand tighter, yet her eyes avoided mine, as if something inside her was gnawing away. Whenever Dad's name, Davis Price, came up, she suddenly fell silent. Her face would tense as though she were holding back an enormous pain. I tried asking gently, "Do you miss Dad a lot? He left us so suddenly." She only nodded, lips pressed tight, then quickly changed the subject. "Enough about that. Tell me about you, Peyton. How's life in New York?" I could feel it clearly. Something wasn't right. My heart beat faster every time it happened, nerves building like I was waiting for a bomb to go off. Uncle Vicente noticed too, but he only shook his head slightly and whispered to me outside the room, "Give her time, Peyton. She's been through too much." But I couldn't just wait. The unease kept growing, a shadow creeping into our rare moments of happiness. Then one day everything changed. The phone rang early in the morning while I was making coffee in the mansion. It was the psychiatric hospital. "Mr. Peyton Price, your mother, Mrs. Dorothy, has asked to see you and Mr. Vicente immediately. She says it's urgent." My stomach clenched. I called Uncle Vicente at once, voice shaking. "Uncle, Mom wants us there right now. It sounds serious." We raced to the hospital, the car speeding through the streets of New York, the atmosphere inside thick with tension. "What do you think it is?" Uncle asked. I only shook my head, dread rising like a tide. When we entered her room, Mom was sitting up in bed, clutching the sheets, her face pale but alert. She motioned for us to close the door. The air suddenly felt suffocating, the tension so thick I could hear my own breathing. After a long, painful internal struggle, eyes red, head bowed, Mom finally broke down in tears. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her trembling voice spoke. "Peyton, Vicente, I can't keep hiding it anymore. Davis's death, it wasn't natural." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I collapsed into a chair, stunned, heart racing wildly. "Mom, what are you saying?" I stammered, my voice breaking from shock. Uncle Vicente gripped her hand tightly and urged, "Dorothy, calm down and tell us." She wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and continued, "It was Logan Price, your brother, and his wife Brianna. They murdered your father to seize all the money and the company." I froze completely. Logan, my own brother, the one I had always trusted, the one who handled everything after Dad died. Scattered memories flooded back like a storm. Dad's sudden heart attack, the will being read just days after the funeral, and Logan suddenly inheriting everything, the house, Dad's small company, all of it. Now those fragments rearranged themselves into a cold, deliberate, terrifying sequence. I knew Mom wasn't lying. My heart pounded with a mix of dread and agony. She explained how she knew. A few days after the will was read, I accidentally overheard Logan and Brianna talking behind closed doors. Brianna said, "It's done now. If we hadn't acted in time, the real will would have come out and we'd have lost everything." Hearing that, Mom said, she went numb with horror. She realized Logan and Brianna had killed her husband. In a panic, she burst into the room to confront them. I screamed. "What have you done to my husband?" she recounted, voice shaking. Right in front of her, Logan and Brianna denied everything, claiming she had misheard and was imagining things because of grief. "You're just imagining it, Mom," Logan had said, pretending to comfort her. But she didn't believe them. In desperation, she told them she would tell me everything. The truth couldn't stay buried. "I'll tell Peyton. He needs to know." At that, Logan's mask dropped. His face twisted with rage. In a fit of fury, he grabbed her arm. "Shut up. If you dare say a word, I'll kill you too, just like I did him," he snarled, voice low and venomous. Tears poured down Mom's face as she told us, her trembling hand clutching mine. In the violent struggle that followed, Logan shoved her hard. She fell backward, her head striking the corner of the table with a sickening crack, and she lost consciousness instantly. I remembered that moment years ago when Logan had called to say Mom had fallen and needed to be rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, he had brushed it off as a careless accident, nothing more. I had believed him. I was drowning in grief over Dad. When she woke up, her memory was fragmented, her speech incoherent, the first signs of mental breakdown appearing. Logan quickly spun the story that she had suffered severe psychological shock after her husband's death. He kept pressing me to sign the papers committing her to long-term psychiatric care, effectively silencing any chance she might speak the truth. "Big brother, Mom needs specialists. We can't take care of her properly," he had said back then, voice dripping with false concern. In my confusion and trust, I had unwittingly helped Logan lock her away in silence for years. Now, with everything laid bare, I sat stunned, heartbroken, and burning with rage. For the first time in my life, I faced the truth about my father's death. Not an accident, but murder. My chest felt crushed, tears spilled over. I shouted in that hospital room, how could Logan do something like this? Uncle Vicente had listened to Mom's entire account without interrupting once, his face strangely calm, no explosion of shock or anger like mine. He simply sat there, eyes slightly narrowed as though fitting puzzle pieces together in his mind. The moment Mom finished, he drew a deep breath and spoke, voice low but resolute. "Thank you for telling us, Dorothy. The truth is, I've suspected something for a long time." I whipped around to stare at him, heart pounding. "Uncle, you already knew?" He shook his head, eyes steady yet pained. "Not everything. But when I found Dorothy and then tracked you down, I hired private investigators to look into both brothers. What you've just told us fits perfectly. The first thing that made me suspicious was the will. Davis would never have left everything to one son and nothing to the other." He continued, voice even, like he was reading a report. "I only brought you to New York after I had clarified certain things. My investigators dug deep into financial records, the will, and Davis's medical history. There were irregularities. The sudden death, the will announced far too quickly, Dorothy being committed so fast. I thought it might be a mistake or pressure from somewhere, but I had no hard proof. I brought you here first to protect you, to place you safely inside the family, and to keep watching Logan from a distance. I didn't want to jump to conclusions because Logan, no matter what, he is still my nephew, Davis's blood." From that moment on, all three of us understood that a confrontation with the man who had committed these crimes was now inevitable. The air in the room turned stifling, thick with the tension of an approaching storm. I stood and paced, mind reeling. Logan, my little brother, the boy I had shared toys and teenage secrets with, was a murderer? Uncle Vicente stood up, his voice calm but resolute. "We cannot let Logan walk free any longer. But we must keep this completely secret, Peyton. He must not know that we're on to him." I nodded, my heart pounding, feeling as though I were stepping into a dark, twisting maze. After learning the full truth from my mother, Uncle Vicente and I decided to conduct a covert investigation, making absolutely sure Logan and Brianna never suspected a thing. One tiny slip could bring everything crashing down, and my mother, she could be in danger again. On the drive back from the hospital, the car sped through the streets of New York, but my mind was filled only with images of Logan, his fake smile, his cold eyes. I instructed Mom to keep pretending she hadn't fully recovered, to maintain the appearance of someone still mentally unstable so Logan wouldn't grow suspicious and strike again. Uncle Vicente had hidden cameras installed in her hospital room and around the facility, monitored 24/7 by a professional security team. In the car, he said, "I have the best people. They'll do it without anyone noticing. Dorothy will be safe." I exhaled in relief, but the tension never left me. What if Logan visited her and noticed something? He was clever, and now I knew exactly how ruthless he could be. We began the investigation with the most basic clues. Thanks to the Price family's extensive connections in the medical world, Uncle Vicente pulled the complete emergency room records from the night my father died. We sat in the mansion's study under the dim glow of a desk lamp, poring over documents delivered through private channels. My pulse raced as he pointed to a line. The ambulance response was delayed by an abnormal 30 minutes, Peyton. Your father reached the hospital far later than the emergency call would suggest, and there are clear signs of tampering with the original medical file. Certain cardiac readings were altered, as if someone wanted to hide the real cause of death. Uncle Vicente then traced the comings and goings at the house that night, using private investigators to pull neighborhood security footage and phone records. The results left me speechless. Logan and Brianna were the last two people with my father before he died. They stayed until very late, Peyton, Uncle said, his voice dropping. No one else was there. The 911 call came from Logan's phone, but far too late. I clenched my fists, rage boiling inside me. My own brother, the one who had smiled at me the next morning, pretending he knew nothing. I couldn't just sit still. I decided to take action myself. I started by tracking down the nurse who had cared for Dad that night, a woman who had been abruptly fired shortly after the funeral. Using old records, I found her address and drove to a suburb of Raleigh, heart hammering the entire way. She opened the door, suspicion written across her face. I introduced myself as Davis Price's son, and after some persuading, she told me, I saw Brianna bring medicine into Mr. Davis's room that night. She said it was extra medication prescribed by the doctor. The next morning I was fired, no explanation. Her words cut through me like a knife. I recorded the conversation, hands shaking, then raced back to New York to show Uncle Vicente. This is our first solid piece of evidence, he said, eyes gleaming. From there, I tracked down Dad's personal lawyer, an elderly man in Raleigh I remembered from the funeral. I arranged a private meeting, pretending I just wanted to discuss the old will. At first, he clung to client confidentiality and insisted everything had been perfectly legal. Everything was above board, Peyton. The will was crystal clear. But when I laid out the evidence, tampered medical records, the nurse's statement, his calm facade began to crack. His face went pale, his hand tightened around his glass. You know something, don't you? I pressed, voice low and forceful. Talk, before I hand you over to the police. Cornered, the lawyer finally confessed, head bowed, voice trembling. After Davis died, Logan came to me with a different will and demanded I present it to the family. He threatened to destroy my career, ruin my reputation, and offered a large sum to keep quiet. I sat frozen, heart thundering. Out of fear and cowardice, I agreed to present the fake will Logan gave me. The real one, the one Davis had actually signed, was taken by Logan that very night. That confession exploded in my mind like a bomb. I recorded everything, hands ice cold from adrenaline. Using that breakthrough, I went to the notary office and public records department in Raleigh. I spent hours cross-checking signatures, dates, and file codes, and discovered the will presented after the funeral had been altered and substituted in the system. Dad's signature was forged, I whispered to Uncle Vicente when I returned, voice shaking with fury. At the same time, Uncle Vicente used the family's financial network to trace payments into the lawyer's accounts right after the funeral. We sat in a locked office, computer screens glowing with data. He pointed. Here, a large transfer from a shell company controlled by Logan. Not a coincidence. My heart raced faster, the hunt feeling like stalking a dangerous animal. Expanding the investigation, I uncovered that Logan was using multiple shell companies to launder money, hide illegal profits, and move funds offshore. Through Uncle's contacts, I hired a professional hacker. The results chilled me. Numerous transactions timed perfectly with the period right after Dad's death and the reading of the fake will. He used Dad's money to build his own empire, I told Uncle, voice thick with hatred. Brianna turned out to be the one directly running the illegal financial network, covering the money trail for her husband. I remembered her, Logan's cold, quiet wife, now revealed as the mastermind behind it all. She personally signed dozens of those transactions, Uncle Vicente confirmed after reviewing the reports. The tension rose. I felt we were closing in on the truth but also getting closer to real danger. Every night I lay awake thinking of Dad, of Mom, of Logan. "You'll pay for what you did to our parents, Logan," I whispered into the darkness. I compiled everything. Tampered medical records, witness statements, the lawyer's confession, notary discrepancies, and the money laundering trail. I spent hours in my room organizing it all into a thick dossier, hands trembling from exhaustion and emotion. I turned the complete investigative file over to Uncle Vicente, who immediately mobilized the family's legal team, preparing for a direct confrontation and the full reopening of the case. "We have enough evidence now," he said as he took the folder, voice steady but eyes burning. I nodded, heart pounding wildly as we waited for the right moment. Did Logan suspect anything? Was he watching us? This investigation had become a hunt, and I was the hunter, yet I could just as easily become the prey. Deep down, I was terrified. This secret had changed me forever. Just when everything seemed to be falling into place, the complete dossier ready, the family lawyers on standby, strange signs began to appear around me. At first, I thought it was just stress playing tricks on my mind. But soon it became unmistakable. One afternoon, while driving from the mansion into central New York to meet an old witness, I felt something was wrong. In the rearview mirror, I spotted a sleek black car tailing me at a careful distance. Not close enough to be certain, but close enough to make dread rise in my chest. I suddenly turned into a narrow side street. The black car followed, then vanished when I pulled over. My heart pounded, cold sweat soaking my back. "You're imagining things, Peyton," I told myself, but deep down I knew I wasn't. The mysterious cars became more frequent, on the highway and rush hour traffic, even near the psychiatric hospital when I visited Mom. They always kept their distance, ghostly shadows that left me sleepless, constantly looking over my shoulder. Then the anonymous threatening letters started appearing, slipped under the door of my room in the mansion. The first one was cheap white paper, typed letters. "Stop now or you will lose everything." Short, cold, like a whisper from hell. I picked it up with shaking hands, heart racing, and ran straight to Uncle Vicente's study. "Uncle, look at this," I said, voice cracking. He read it, his face darkening. "Logan, he's panicking." But we didn't go to the police, not yet. The next letters came thicker and faster. "The past should stay buried." Each time I opened one, I felt someone breathing down my neck. At night, I began receiving calls from blocked numbers. The phone would ring at 2 or 3 a.m. I'd jolt awake, pick up, and hear nothing but slow, heavy breathing before the line went dead. No words, just breath, a silent warning. I tried calling back. Nothing. The atmosphere around me turned into an invisible hunt. I no longer dared go out alone. I double-checked every window, every door. "Does he already know I'm investigating?" I asked Uncle, voice trembling. He shook his head. "Your brother doesn't know yet, but he suspects." The tension reached its peak one late night when the phone rang at 11 p.m. It was Mom, her voice shaking over the line. "Peyton, someone threatened me. They said they'll kill me if I say another word." She was panicking, sobbing, barely able to speak. My heart stopped. I jumped out of bed, threw on a jacket. "Stay right there, Mom. I'm coming." I tried calling Uncle Vicente, but he was in a late meeting, so I drove to the hospital alone, mind spinning. The streets of New York were nearly empty in the dead of night, streetlights casting a sickly yellow glow. All I could see was my frail mother being terrorized. I sped through red lights, heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. When I arrived, she was curled up on the bed, face ashen, eyes red from crying. I hugged her tightly and calmed her. "I'm here now, tell me what happened." After hours of soothing her, making warm tea, talking about old memories until she steadied, I immediately checked the hidden camera system Uncle Vicente had installed. We had a live app on our phones. I opened it, hands shaking, and rewound the footage from that afternoon. On the screen, I clearly saw 2 men in dark coats and low-brimmed hats approach Mom from behind while she walked in the hospital garden. They leaned in close, whispered something in her ear, then melted away like ghosts. Mom froze for several seconds before hurrying back to her room, face drained of color. "What did they say?" I asked, voice low with rage. Through tears, she repeated, "They told me to keep my mouth shut forever or the deaths won't stop with Davis. They know I'm lucid again, Peyton." From that moment, I understood. Logan was behind every single threat. But how did he know Mom had recovered? We had been so careful. She still pretended to be confused around strangers. Is there a mole inside the hospital? I wondered, pulse racing. Or had Logan been watching all along? I didn't have time to think further. Years of suppressed fury erupted inside me like a volcano. Blood rushed to my head, fists clenched so tight they hurt. I decided I couldn't stay silent another second. I had to confront him face to face, look him in the eye, and force the truth out. I took the first morning flight back to Raleigh, no warning, no cover. On the plane, my heart pounded wildly, adrenaline surging as if I were walking straight into a tiger's den. I clutched a copy of the entire investigative file in my hands. Logan's house was in the suburbs, a luxurious villa he had bought with the inheritance. Money I now knew came from our father. I pounded on the door at 8 p.m. under a light rain. Logan opened it, surprise flashing across his face before he quickly regained composure. "Peyton? What are you doing here so suddenly?" I shoved past him without waiting for an invitation and threw the thick folder onto the living room table. Papers scattered everywhere. Medical records, witness statements, money trails. "Explain this, Logan. The threats against Mom, you're behind them, aren't you?" He froze, eyes scanning the documents. Brianna rushed in from the kitchen, face white as a sheet, immediately shrieking, "Threats? We don't know anything about threats. Are you trying to take the inheritance back? Dad left everything to Logan legally." Logan quickly regained his cool and denied everything. "You've lost your mind, Peyton. These papers are fake. You're just playing the victim because you're jealous of me." He stepped closer, towering over me, lowering his voice to a menacing growl. "If you keep digging up the past, the consequences won't stop at warnings. Who do you think you are?" His breath was hot against my face, thick with threat. I stared straight into his eyes, unflinching, making it clear I was ready for the collision that could no longer be avoided. "You won't get away with this, Logan. For everything you did to Mom and Dad, you'll pay in full." We stood inches apart, the air between us stretched like a wire about to snap. Brianna yanked Logan back, screeching, "Get out of our house right now, Peyton." Before I left, Logan delivered one last icy warning. "You think you've won. This is only the beginning, and you'll be the one who regrets it in the end." I walked out of that house with rage and resolve pushed to their absolute limit, knowing the fight had now entered a point of no return. The tension was at its peak. I felt like I was racing against time. What would Logan do next? Escalate the threats? Strike directly? On the flight back, I stared out the window at New York emerging beneath the clouds, but all I could see was his face, my little brother, now my enemy. This secret had driven us into a merciless showdown. As the plane touched down at JFK, it was already late at night. I took a taxi back to the mansion. The neon lights of New York shimmered along the streets, but to me they looked like flickering ghosts. Uncle Vicente was waiting in the living room, his face weary beneath the chandelier's glow. I told him everything. How I had thrown the dossier on the table, Logan's final threat, every word. He listened without interrupting, only clenching his fists tighter. "He's panicking," he said at last. "But you've rattled him now. From this point on, we have to be twice as careful." We stayed up until the early hours, reviewing and finalizing the plan one last time. The dossier was complete. The nurse's statement, the lawyer's confession, the money laundering trail. Everything was there. Uncle spoke in a low, decisive voice. "Tomorrow morning we file the report. The legal team will go with us to make sure it's airtight." After the conversation, I tossed and turned all night, a heavy weight pressing on my chest. An uneasy premonition kept creeping in, like a whisper in my head. Something is wrong. It wouldn't let go, as if this were the last calm night I would ever have. The ticking of the clock echoed like a warning with every second. At dawn, I got up to make coffee, hands trembling as I held the cup, staring out the window. New York was waking up, but to me the city now felt like a dangerous maze. Early the next morning, as I was getting ready to leave, dressed in a suit, the copied dossier in my briefcase, the phone rang. It was Uncle Vicente, his voice frantic, completely unlike his usual calm. "Peyton, the office was broken into. All the original evidence files are gone." I stood frozen for several seconds, heart plummeting, the coffee cup slipping from my hand and shattering on the floor. Uncle's office, where we kept the originals, was heavily guarded. Cameras, security, armed guards. How could they vanish so easily? I pulled myself together quickly, remembering the full set of copies I had kept. "Uncle, I still have the complete duplicates. I'm bringing them now." He exhaled in relief. "Good. Meet me at the law firm as planned." I jumped in the car, clutching the remaining folder, those pages now worth more than gold, and sped toward the original meeting point. My hands shook on the wheel. The sense of dread grew stronger. Who broke in? Logan? How did he move so fast? Not long after leaving the residential area, the phone rang again. Uncle Vicente, his voice tighter than ever. "Peyton, listen, there's an emergency at the conglomerate. The entire financial system has been hacked. Internal data is chaos. I have to handle it in person right now." I went numb, gripping the steering wheel harder. "What do we do?" He spoke quickly. "I'll send the legal team straight to you. Wait at the usual cafe. They'll be there in 30 minutes. I'll join as soon as I'm done." The call ended, and everything felt like it was collapsing at once, too perfectly timed. The conglomerate hacked, the office burgled, all on the same morning. This was no coincidence. Logan was striking back, but how did he know our exact plan? I pulled into the roadside cafe, heart pounding, glancing around like a fugitive. I decided I couldn't just sit and wait. I kept driving toward the law firm instead. I was on a quiet suburban road, wind whistling through the trees, when suddenly a massive black truck with no visible plates came barreling straight at me from the opposite lane at terrifying speed. I only caught a flash of it before instinct took over. I jerked the wheel hard. Tires screeched on the wet pavement. My car spun out of control, flipped several times, and slammed into the ditch. The sound of twisting metal and shattering glass filled the air. Pain exploded through my body. As consciousness faded, I faintly heard the crash of metal and distant ambulance sirens. Then everything dissolved into darkness. When I woke, I was in a hospital room, every inch of me aching as if stabbed with needles, my head wrapped in thick bandages. The harsh white lights and the sharp smell of disinfectant burned my senses. I tried to sit up and was met with searing pain. A doctor entered, expression grave. "Mr. Peyton Price, you were in a coma for 3 days after a severe traffic accident. A truck struck your vehicle head-on, but the driver fled the scene. You're lucky to be alive. Several broken ribs, head trauma." 3 days? My heart sank. The plan, the evidence. Soon afterward, police officers came in to question me about the crash and informed me that my car had burned completely at the scene. "Nothing could be salvaged, sir. The fire started immediately after impact." I went cold. The copied dossier, every last piece of evidence reduced to ashes? The officers asked for details. "Did you notice anything suspicious? Anyone following you?" I gave them the basics, but my mind was chaos. They took notes, promised to investigate, and left. After the formalities, I lay silently in the hospital bed, numb with the realization that everything I had fought for over months had crumbled in a single morning. Burglary, cyber attack, car crash, one domino after another, perfectly aligned. Logan? He was behind it all, I was certain. But how did he know every move? Who told him? Less than an hour later, Uncle Vicente burst into the hospital room, his face heavy with worry he could no longer hide. The man who was always calm now had dark circles under his eyes, disheveled hair, and a wrinkled suit that looked like it hadn't been changed since yesterday. "Peyton, thank God you're awake," he said in a hoarse voice, sitting beside the bed and gripping my hand tightly. I looked at him, my heart tightening. "Uncle, what happened with the conglomerate? The office break-in? Did we lose everything?" He let out a long sigh, lowered his head for a moment as if gathering his thoughts, then explained that on the very day of my accident, a massive crisis had hit the conglomerate's financial system and internal data. Everything went haywire, Peyton. Accounts frozen, data wiped, stock prices plummeting. I had to personally direct operations for hours, flying in IT experts from everywhere. A chill ran down my spine. The exact same day I was run off the road, he made it clear the incident was no accident. Malware had been planted, access came from an internal IP. But I still don't know who orchestrated it. It could be hired hackers, or someone inside the family. Those last words sent ice through my veins. Someone inside the family? The timing of my crash made Uncle Vicente instantly realize this was no coincidence. An unseen hand was orchestrating the entire chain of events, and every trace had been meticulously erased. He spoke softly, voice heavy. "This wasn't random, Peyton. Someone knew our plan, and they wanted to stop it dead." He looked at me, eyes full of fear. At that moment, I understood. I had become a target that needed to be eliminated, not just by Logan, but by someone else inside the family working behind the scenes. "Uncle, have we lost everything?" I asked, my voice growing faint. He shook his head slowly. "Not yet. I'll get it all back." But seeing his shoulders slump with exhaustion, I realized for the first time that even this unshakable man had reached his limit. After leaving the hospital, Uncle Vicente immediately began trying to recover every original piece of evidence we had once held. He called me hourly with updates, his voice over the phone still full of determination. "I'm following every lead, Peyton." But bad news came in waves. When he went back to the Raleigh hospital where Dad had been treated, the original medical records had been replaced with edited copies. All the previous irregularities, the delayed ambulance, the altered cardiac readings, were gone. "Someone got in and changed them," he said, voice seething. The medical staff who had been on duty that night had vanished or become unreachable. One nurse disappeared. The attending doctor suddenly transferred. "They were paid off or threatened," Uncle concluded. Then the notary office that stored the will archives mysteriously caught fire in the middle of the night. The old storage room burned, many original documents irretrievable. The archive caught fire? How is that a coincidence? I asked over the phone, my heart sinking. A long silence then. "It's not a coincidence. Someone is erasing the trail." The lawyer who had confessed everything to me suddenly retracted his entire statement when Uncle contacted him, claiming client confidentiality and refusing further cooperation, his voice trembling with fear. "I don't know anything. Don't call me again." All of this happened within 24 hours of my accident, like a hurricane sweeping away everything in its path. I realized a powerful force had moved ahead of us, wiping out every trace and leaving the case nearly empty-handed. "We've been played, Peyton," Uncle said, voice bitter. Lying in the hospital bed, receiving one devastating update after another, my spirit collapsed under the weight. Every avenue of resistance I had built was being broken one by one. Files gone, evidence vanished, and here I was, powerless. How did everything fall apart so fast? I whispered to myself, tears rolling down my cheeks. The tension had turned into despair. It felt as though the entire world was against me. Still, Uncle Vicente said he hadn't given up. He was quietly putting people on every tampered link, even knowing how dangerous the path was. "I have connections, Peyton. We'll get it back." He told me he had hired elite private investigators, was reviewing security footage around the office, tracing the hacking IPs. "Someone inside the family is helping Logan," he whispered over the phone, voice low for fear of being overheard. I nodded. Though he couldn't see, Heart racing again, danger was closing in and I could do nothing but lie here. The days in the hospital dragged on endlessly. I stared out the window at bustling New York, but to me it had become a deadly maze. Then one afternoon, while I was trying to doze off, the door opened. Logan walked in, calm and ice cold, dressed in a black suit, holding a cheap bouquet like a brother visiting the sick. My heart stopped, rage surging. You dare show your face here?" He set the flowers on the table, sat down, and spoke evenly. "Peyton, I heard about your accident. I was so worried. Why didn't you call me?" I glared at him, fingers clutching the sheets. He delivered his warning disguised as advice. "You've been meddling in things that aren't yours, digging up matters that should stay buried. Dad is gone. Mom, she's fragile. Don't make things worse." Then he said it plainly, voice low and menacing. "If you keep going, you could lose everything, not just money, but the last people you still have." His words chilled me to the bone. Was he threatening Mom? "Uncle Vicente?" I shouted. "You plotted to murder Dad. I know everything." He only smirked. "You're imagining things. Get well soon." He walked out, leaving the room thick with fear. A few days after that visit, the worst news of all arrived. The phone rang early in the morning. Uncle Vicente, voice breaking. "Peyton, your mother passed away suddenly in the hospital. Drug-induced shock." The blow came so fast I went completely numb. Every ounce of strength drained from me in an instant. The phone slipped from my hand. Mom, the woman who had suffered for years, who had just begun to recover, dead from a drug reaction. When I remembered Logan's warning and the timing, just days after he visited me, an icy suspicion flooded my mind. Her death was no accident. Logan? Did he do it? Or someone else? I broke down and sobbed, the first time since Dad died. My body hurt, but the pain in my heart was worse. Despite not being fully recovered, I demanded early discharge and signed the liability waiver. In the depths of grief, I personally arranged Mom's funeral, chose the coffin, the flowers, the burial plot in Raleigh beside Dad. Standing silently before her casket, feeling the world had completely collapsed, I looked at her lying there, face peaceful, eyes forever closed. "Mom, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you," I whispered, tears falling. Before both my parents' graves, with the Raleigh wind blowing gently around me, I swore. No matter if I have to take on the entire family, I will drag the person or people behind my father's and mother's deaths into the light. Standing over their graves, I spoke aloud, clutching a handful of earth. "I swear before you both I will expose everything. Logan, no matter where you hide, I will find you and make you pay." Tension had now turned into iron resolve. Logan, Brianna, and anyone who conspired with them, they would all pay. But deep inside, the grief had drained me dry. Mom was gone. Dad was gone. What did I have left? After Mom's death, I collapsed completely, almost cutting myself off from the entire world. I locked the door to my room in the mansion, turned off my phone, and stopped answering emails or calls. For the first few days, I lay motionless on the bed, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming without end. Eating became a burden. Uncle Vicente would bring a tray to the door and knock gently. "Peyton, please eat something." I would only shake my head or pretend to be asleep. The grief was a monster gnawing at me from the inside, making everything feel meaningless. Why did Mom have to die? I asked myself hundreds of times, my mind a chaos of memories. Her hugging me in the hospital, her warm voice telling old stories. What had Logan done? Poisoned her? Or was it really just a drug reaction like the hospital claimed? I couldn't sleep. Night after night I lay awake thinking of my parents, how they had sacrificed everything for me and how I had failed to protect them. Uncle Vicente stayed by my side the whole time, quietly comforting and caring for me without pushing or asking too much. He would sit outside my door for hours, bringing hot tea or books, saying only, "I'm here if you need me." His patience moved me, but it also hurt more. He had lost his brother and now his sister-in-law, yet he still held strong for my sake. Time dragged on, slow and murky like a muddy river. Everything gradually quieted down. No more threatening letters, no late-night calls, no strange cars tailing me. Every lead had been erased. Not a single trace remained that could reopen the truth. Uncle Vicente kept trying to investigate, but every thread was broken. The nurse gone, the lawyer silent, records burned. "We're empty-handed now, Peyton," he said one evening, voice exhausted. I sat staring out the window at the New York rain pattering against the glass, slowly accepting that every door to justice had slammed shut. My parents died wronged and I couldn't do anything. I whispered, tears rolling down my face. The iron resolve I had sworn at their graves was fading, replaced by despair. I began thinking of giving up, going back to Raleigh, living in hiding, forgetting everything. Why keep fighting? We've already lost. Uncle Vicente shook his head. Don't think so negatively, Peyton. But I no longer believed. The pain was too great, and I felt more alone than ever. One day, while I lay numb on the bed staring at the ceiling, the phone rang. An unknown number. A polite voice on the other end said, "Mr. Peyton Price? This is Chase Bank. There is a safe deposit inheritance registered in the name of Dorothy Price, activated only upon her passing. You are the sole beneficiary." I was bewildered. What could Mom possibly have left me besides memories? The person insisted, "You need to come in person to claim it." I told Uncle Vicente, and despite our exhaustion, we decided to go to the bank as scheduled. On the way, the car glided through bustling Manhattan, but I only stared blankly out the window. "What did Mom leave, Uncle?" I asked. He shook his head. "I don't know. But Dorothy, she was very clever." A nervous premonition rose inside me. It felt as though Mom was sending a message from beyond the grave. After completing all the identity verification and legal formalities, Mom's death certificate, my ID, the necessary signatures, the bank handed me a sealed envelope of documents, a small USB drive, and a handwritten letter. My hands shook as I took them. They felt impossibly heavy. "This is everything, sir," the employee said professionally. On the ride home, we barely spoke, both sensing we were holding something of enormous importance. The car moved smoothly, but my heart pounded as if waiting for a bomb to go off. "Let's open it at home," Uncle said quietly. Back at the mansion, we went into the study and locked the door. I tore open the seal with trembling fingers. The papers nearly slipped from my grasp. When I opened the folder, Uncle Vicente and I froze. It was a complete duplicate set of every piece of evidence proving Logan and Brianna's crimes. Tampered medical records, the nurse's statement, the lawyer's confession, notary discrepancies, the money laundering trail. Everything, and in even greater detail than we had ever managed to gather. The USB contained full audio recordings made by Mom, the conversation she had overheard between Logan and Brianna, her recordings of the nurse and the lawyer, plus dozens of supporting documents about the fake will and Dad's death. I plugged it into the laptop and heard Mom's trembling voice recounting the overheard words. "It's done now." We sat speechless, breathless. We had never imagined that while she was being watched and threatened, Mom had quietly preserved everything. The frail woman in the psychiatric ward had been a silent warrior all along. Only then did Uncle Vicente suddenly remember something he had long overlooked. He sank into a chair, eyes wide. "My God, now I remember." He recalled that once Mom had asked to see all the evidence related to her husband's death, and he had shown her without suspicion. She was lucid then. She studied the files very carefully. I thought she just wanted to understand. He had no idea that at that moment she had secretly made a complete backup copy, preparing for the worst. She sent it to the bank, set to activate only after her death, he whispered, voice filled with awe and admiration. I opened Mom's handwritten letter with shaking hands. The paper was thin, her writing shaky but clear. In it she wrote that if I was reading this, it meant she was no longer alive, and that she had known Logan would never stop until every trace of truth was destroyed. My beloved son, I knew he would come for me if I recovered, but I wasn't afraid. I prepared. This is everything I was able to preserve. Recordings, copies of every file. Use it, Peyton. Get justice for your father. She said she was leaving me everything she could safeguard so I would have the strength to continue the path of justice I had chosen. I love you, and I am so proud of you. Don't give up. I read it through tears, voice choking as I read aloud for Uncle. He lowered his head, eyes red. Dorothy, she just saved us the winning goal. Uncle Vicente and I sat in heavy silence, realizing that all this time Mom had been fighting alone for her husband and her son. In the hospital, pretending to be broken, she had secretly copied everything and sent it to the bank, all to protect the truth. The tension surged again. Now we had a new, even stronger weapon, but the pain remained, draining me dry. Mom was gone, yet she had left hope behind. We will use it, Uncle said, voice firm. I nodded, resolve returning. The secret Mom had left behind, her message from beyond the grave, would change everything. We sat there in the mansion's study under the dim glow of the desk lamp, the folder and USB lying on the table between us like a treasure. I held Mom's handwritten letter, my fingers tracing her trembling script, and tears welled up again. Mom, how did you manage all of this? I whispered, voice breaking with emotion. Uncle Vicente sat across from me, eyes red but trying to stay composed. He had lost his brother, his sister-in-law, and now this secret felt like her final gift. Dorothy, she was stronger than any of us ever knew, he said softly, gripping his glass tightly. We spent hours going through the USB. Mom's voice rang out clear, her detailed account of the overheard conversation, the secret recording she had made of the nurse and the lawyer during our visits. Everything lined up perfectly. The forged will, the money laundering trail, the tampering with medical records. This is undeniable evidence, Uncle said, voice trembling with both excitement and rage. My heart pounded. It felt like I was holding a ticking bomb. Logan would never see this coming. With the complete set of duplicates from the bank now in our hands, Uncle Vicente and I decided we would not wait another day. We strike now, I said, standing and pacing the room despite the lingering pain from the accident. Determination overpowered everything. Uncle nodded, eyes alight. Exactly. We take this straight to federal investigators. No more chances for Logan. We made several extra copies and secured them in safe places. The lesson from last time was still fresh. Uncle called James Harlan, the family's long-trusted lawyer, an older man with decades of experience in complex cases. James, I need you on this immediately, he said over the phone, voice low but urgent. Murder, forged will, possible poisoning. We have ironclad proof. Meet us tomorrow morning. Mr. Harlan agreed. We spent the entire night mapping out every detail. Who would present what, how to protect the evidence, and how to prepare for Logan's inevitable counterattack. The next morning we arrived at the FBI building in Manhattan, the dossier locked inside a numbered briefcase. The atmosphere was cold and sterile, security checks rigorous. My pulse raced faster with every step. After reviewing the USB and documents, the lead agent, a middle-aged woman named Sarah Klein, looked grave. This is extremely serious, Mr. Price. We're opening an investigation immediately. Tension surged as she called in her team for a preliminary analysis. In less than 48 hours, emergency arrest warrants were issued for Logan and Brianna. I sat in the office, hands shaking around a coffee cup, imagining the scene. Logan in Raleigh, eating breakfast when the door is smashed open and agents storm in. Logan and Brianna were arrested at their home, handcuffed in front of stunned neighbors. Uncle Vicente got the call from Agent Klein and relayed it to me. They were taken this morning, Peyton. Logan screamed his innocence. Brianna sobbed. It didn't help. I pictured it. Their luxurious villa turned into a crime scene, neighbors whispering, news crews already circling. My heart pounded with a mix of nerves and grim satisfaction. Justice had finally begun. During interrogation, they initially denied everything. Logan remained calm. "I'm innocent. This is my brother trying to frame me." Brianna wept. "We didn't do anything." But faced with the mountain of irrefutable evidence, Mom's recordings, financial trails, copied confessions, they broke. Logan admitted he and Brianna had killed Dad after learning he had signed a new will. They forged the old one to seize everything. Dad was going to give it all to Peyton, he confessed, voice dripping with hatred. "I couldn't let that happen." Brianna admitted she had personally orchestrated the threats against the lawyer, bribed witnesses, and tampered with hospital records. As the investigation widened, the medical examiner exhumed Mom's records for re-examination. I waited in agony, heart racing every time an agent called. The autopsy confirmed Mom had not died from an accidental reaction but from a deliberate overdose of sedatives. Premeditated poisoning. Tracing the payment led straight to an intermediary account controlled by Brianna. She finally confessed to ordering Mom's murder to silence her. She was recovering. She would have told everything, Brianna said, voice shaking. I went numb, tears streaming. Mom had died because I kept digging. Then came the revelation no one expected. In his full confession, Logan implicated Chris as the inside man in the family. Chris was summoned and under pressure admitted his role. I sat behind one-way glass watching him, pale and trembling. He confessed that from the moment I appeared, the default heir position he had been raised to inherit began to crumble. The fear of losing power and wealth bred constant resentment. Logan had fed that fear, convincing him I was an outsider who didn't belong, that my presence threatened his future in the conglomerate. Obsessed with preserving his place, Chris had supplied Logan with our schedules, orchestrated the financial sabotage, and facilitated the mansion break-in. He claimed he only wanted to discredit me and push me out of the line of succession, never imagining it would escalate to murder and total cover-up. I didn't know it would lead to people dying, he sobbed. Uncle Vicente went white listening to the confession, realizing his own son's blind ambition and jealousy, fueled by Logan's hatred, had nearly killed me. He sat beside me, face ashen, fists clenched. Chris, I never thought my own son would help your brother. I put my arm around him, voice hoarse. It's not your fault, Uncle. But he bowed his head, tears falling. I was blind. I'm sorry, Peyton. The case expanded, the family empire shook, headlines exploded across the news. The trial was massive, lasting weeks, with hundreds of pages of evidence, testimony, and cross-examinations. I sat in the front row, heart pounding every time the prosecutor presented Mom's recordings, the financial data, the forensic reports. Logan and Brianna sat behind bars, gaunt and hollow-eyed, Chris beside them, head bowed. In open court, every charge was proven beyond doubt. Premeditated murder, forgery of a will to seize assets, destruction of evidence, witness tampering, poisoning Mom to silence her, and conspiracy to conceal the crimes. Logan was sentenced to life without parole for premeditated murder, will forgery, evidence destruction, and ordering the murder of a witness. Brianna received 30 years for masterminding the poisoning, complicity in murder, threats, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Chris was sentenced to 18 years without parole for sabotaging internal financial systems, conspiring to conceal crimes, and illegal interference in business operations. The court voided the forged will, reinstated Dad's true will, and seized all assets obtained through crime from Logan and Brianna for restitution. I sat listening to the verdict without cheering, only bowing my head in silence. It was over, but I felt no relief or joy. Just a cold, hollow emptiness after so much loss. My parents were dead, my brother imprisoned, my cousin a traitor. Justice had come, but far too late. Sometime later, once my physical wounds had mostly healed, I decided to visit Logan in prison, one final act to close the past for good. I drove to the federal facility, my heart strangely calm, no longer burning with rage. Through the glass partition, Logan sat thin and hollow-eyed. the arrogance gone. Facing the brother who had murdered our father and indirectly caused our mother's death, I felt no explosion of anger anymore. All that remained was an absolute icy detachment, as if every emotion had been drained from me. Logan looked at me through the bars, voice rough. "Peyton, did you come here to gloat?" I met his gaze without flinching. "I once had a little brother, but the moment you raised your hand against Mom and Dad, that person died. I came only to end it, to sever every last tie of blood between us, to bury the brother who had died inside me long ago." I spoke slowly, each word cutting through the silence. "You will live the rest of your life with what you've done. As for me, from this moment on, there is nothing left between us. No blood, no bond, nothing." Logan lowered his head slightly. He didn't cry, didn't argue. He only nodded, a man completely broken. I turned and walked away without looking back. From that instant, everything between us was finished forever. I left the prison with the last of my hatred finally extinguished, yet the wounds in my heart would never fully heal. On the drive home, the wind blew in through the window, carrying the scent of freedom, but inside I still felt empty. After the trial, I returned to the conglomerate and worked side by side with Uncle Vicente to completely restructure the entire organization, cleaning up personnel, finances, and operational processes. The first few weeks were brutal. My body still ached from the accident. Every movement sent sharp pain through my broken ribs, but I refused to rest. Uncle Vicente summoned me to the main office, a vast room with a walnut desk and a sweeping view of the Hudson River, and said, "Peyton, we have to clean this place from the roots. The conglomerate has been rotting for far too long." I nodded, sat down, opened my laptop, and got to work. We spent weeks combing through personnel files. Who had helped Chris with the hack? Who had ties to Logan? Late-night closed-door meetings ran on black coffee and mountains of paperwork. I reviewed every file, my pulse quickening when I recognized names of people who had once smiled at me in the hallways, now revealed as traitors. One by one, those who had collaborated were removed. A chief financial officer fired for unexplained large transfers, an assistant investigated for leaking my schedule. Each time I signed a termination letter, my hand shook, but I knew it had to be done for Dad, for Mom, for the future. The conglomerate was slowly purified from within like a body expelling toxins. We overhauled procedures, stronger internal audits, new security systems, mandatory ethics training for all staff. I personally drove many of the changes, drawing on my journalism background. We need transparency and public reporting so this can never happen again. Uncle listened and nodded. "You're absolutely right. Davis and your father would be proud." Through competence, resilience, and the fairness I had forged in fire, I quickly proved my true worth, not because of blood, but because of results. I led a financial restructuring project, cut wasteful spending, and redirected capital into clean technology. Within months, profits rose 15%. Employees began to look at me differently, no longer as the outsider, but as a real leader. At one meeting, a senior manager said, "Mr. Peyton, your plan saved us." I smiled, but the ache remained. If only Mom and Dad could have seen this. For the first time, the family officially and publicly acknowledged me as one of their own. No more suspicious glances or guarded whispers. At a modest family dinner, simple wine and food, nothing like the old ostentatious gatherings, Uncle Vicente stood and raised his glass. "To Peyton Price, my nephew, son of Davis, now a pillar of this family." Everyone applauded, and I saw the shift in their eyes, from envy to respect. Grandfather William, the silver-haired patriarch, sat silently at the head of the table as always. But later, in a private family meeting, he called me into his personal library, a room filled with ancient books and the scent of old wood. He rose slowly, walked over, and for the first time embraced me, a belated apology for the mistakes that had driven my father away decades ago. My life gradually settled into a new rhythm. No longer chasing vengeance, no longer haunted by the past, I focused only on building. I woke early, ran through Central Park, breathed the fresh air, then went to the office. Sleepless nights of rage were replaced by new projects, expanding into green industries, funding mental health charities. I met people, laughed, lived, yet deep inside there remained an unfillable void. Mom, Dad, losses that could never be replaced. Uncle Vicente became a second father to me. We shared dinners, told old stories without pain anymore. "You've grown so much, Peyton," he said. I nodded, but a quiet sadness lingered, a new life yet never whole. One day, Uncle Vicente and I drove to Raleigh to visit Mom's grave, now beside Dad's under a canopy of green trees. The long drive was mostly silent, only the faint sound of the radio. When we arrived, a gentle wind carried the scent of wildflowers. Standing before Mom's headstone, I looked back on the entire journey. From that midnight knock, Vicente's face so like Dad's, the hospital visits, the near-fatal crash, the tense trial, to justice today. I knelt, touched the cold stone, and memories flooded back like a film reel. Uncle stood beside me, head bowed in prayer. At the grave, I said to him, voice low and steady, "Uncle, I finally understand. Blind ambition can destroy an entire family, just like it did with Logan and Chris. And silence out of fear is its own kind of guilt, like we once stayed silent about the past." He nodded, eyes glistening. I continued, "Justice doesn't come from revenge. It comes from daring to face the truth, no matter how much blood and tears it costs. That's what Mom did. She quietly preserved the evidence because she knew the truth had to see the light. I declared that a family only truly exists when compassion and honesty remain. Once those are lost, no amount of power or money matters. Everything becomes an empty shell. Looking at everything my family had endured, I believed that more than ever. We had been wealthy, yet nearly destroyed ourselves with greed and lies. Before Mom's grave, I bowed my head, closed the chapter on all the pain, and chose to walk forward living rightly instead of living in hate. I stood up, the wind tousling my hair, and for the first time felt lighter than ever. "Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad," I whispered, then turned and walked away. On the drive home, Uncle and I talked about the future, about the company, about life. A new life had begun, ordinary yet meaningful. No more breathless drama, only peace.